Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our interview with Mike Gillespie and Ellie Hurst. Mike is the CEO of Advent IM, and Ellie is VP at Head of Market Communications and Media at Advent IM. So, guys, thank you for joining us today, and hope it is our first interview this year.
Hi, Boris. Nice to see you and Happy New Year.
Thank you. Happy New Year to you too. So last time we discussed with Mike, we discussed the risk of remote work and what it brings to business. And this time we will focus on third-party assurance, risk management. So Ellie, can you share with us first a little bit your background and what you guys at Advent IM are up to these days?
Yes, so we're a holistic security consultancy, but we also do training and testing as well. So we're largely around the information security of organizational security. And if you think about what's included in ISO 27001, that would be, pure information security, data protection, supply chain security, as well as business continuity, etc. So it's quite a big area, a very important part of business. And one of the bits, obviously, that we're focusing on today falls into that standard, which is supply chain security and assurance. Now, the bit that we do around that is the assurance part, so that we can help businesses look at their third-party suppliers and help them make sure that they're doing the things that they're saying that they're doing and doing those things correctly and in line with their service level agreements with their clients, etc. All
right. Okay, thank you. Mike, could you please briefly introduce yourself? We already spoke to you last, I think 2 years ago about topic of working from home and cybersecurity issues. But maybe just to remind our people what you do and who you are.
Sure. Hi, I'm Mike Gillespie. I'm the Chief Executive Officer at Advent IM, and I oversee all of the training and consultancy delivery. And I'm a lifelong information security, cybersecurity practitioner. So very much started Advent 20 years ago as a player manager to enable me to practice my art the way I wanted to practice it.
All right. So let's discuss with you guys, how does your company approach identifying and assessing potential risk from third party? Mike, you can go ahead.
Thanks, Boris. Well, I suppose we try to look at the third-party threat from a number of different angles. So, you've got the people that you know about within your supply chain, but as we all know, these days it's not really linear. So supply chain in itself maybe isn't the right language anymore, and maybe the right language is supply ecosystem. So we know that you can have branches within your supply chain that often won't be visible to you, and it's what we suppose what we refer to as nth degree visibility, and then we've also got the challenge around onward sharing of confidential information within our supply chain, either deliberately or inadvertently. And then, of course, we've got to understand that if we've got a supply chain, then potentially we are ourselves part of a supply chain. And so there is up chain and down chain threats that come as well. So it's looking at it as a holistic and total environment rather than just worrying about the immediate connections.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Ellie, could you define for us what is the third-party assurance? Sometimes it's referred to as a third-party risk. Sometimes it's like a vendor risk. So a lot of terms. And what are some common examples of it?
Well, I think just to put it into perspective for you, around 35% of organisations back in 2019 had got a complete list of all of the organizations that they shared sensitive information with. When that study was redone for 2022, that had dropped to 32%. So what that means is, at a very basic level, organizations are missing out on being able to assure themselves of that remaining percentage doing the things that they are supposed to be doing, that they've already admitted that they're sharing information with them, but are they doing it securely? Are they doing it in the prescribed ways, using the prescribed methods to the prescribed levels of security that they were supposed to be doing? 32% is actually quite a small number when you think about this. Could be the crown jewels of an organization. That's a fairly small number. Now, if we think about what causes third-party data breach, we know that around 60% of organizations have been breached in the last 12 months caused by a third party. Now, this could be a number of ways. We've heard an awful lot about supply chain malware infections, where a software house has been infected, and so subsequent downloads of what would have been perfectly legitimate software has been infected and then spread throughout a supply chain. So, you know, we've talked about that quite a lot in the past, and this is still quite a prevalent thing. But if we look at that same piece of research, which came out of the Poneman Institute, if anybody's interested in taking a look at it. So if we're saying around 59–60% of organizations are saying that they've had a third party breach, nearly 40% of those were caused by what they call these nth degree parties. And what that means is the organization that you have an agreement with and you're sharing information with has got an agreement with somebody else who they're also sharing your information with, which you may not have agreed to, and you may not have any security oversight of at all. So that's quite a dangerous way of operating. And having no visibility into that nth degree is a risk. And it's a global risk.
Mm-hmm. And that, you know, even assuming that the organization has got prescribed measures in place and has got prescribed policies and processes in place, those prescriptions aren't going to make it to those nth degree connectivity because they're not visible to the organization that's setting the rules.
Mm-hmm. So we saw recently it was an incident with the Guardian newspaper, right? And also more sometimes ago with Target and the Uber. So what are the state of these attacks and how they are getting worse? Is there something that we can do about this as a kind of organization, more standards, or what people in the organization should do to kind of reduce these attacks?
So I suppose if we start with one of your examples, Target, this was not an attack on their mainstream infrastructure either. The route into this organization was via peripheral technology that supported their air conditioning and building management system. So not only are we utilizing a conduit that is a third party, we're using third party technology that's connected to our infrastructure that isn't managed as core technology and therefore often doesn't fall into our testing regime. So it's not getting penetration tested, may not be part of a patching regime. And so again, we've got this hidden layer of threat, this almost invisible threat, because we don't know about these portals that are being installed and providing doorways into our organization so that third parties can manage third party elements of our infrastructure. We also know that several times now, the malware has made its way into an organization's infrastructure because of a phishing failure within the third party, not within our own organization. So we need to understand that all the frailties that we are seeking to address with our own people, those frailties exist within our third party people as well. And are they as robust at educating and maintaining their infrastructure and detecting inbound threats as we are seeking to be? Because otherwise what we have is we've got this beautiful castle with a great moat, but unfortunately there is a trapdoor that comes in through the back of the castle and completely bypasses all of our core security.
Ellie, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I think from a very basic level, looking at some of the reasons why businesses identified that they didn't have complete oversight of all of the businesses that they're sharing with, was the overwhelming majority, 63%, was saying that they had no centralized control over third-party relationships. So the responsibility and the accountability for those relationships sat in disparate places around the organization, and none of them had any security oversight of that. And I think that could be a really quick win for an organization to gather that information together, to sort out some kind of structure and accountability for those relationships. So somebody owns them, somebody owns those relationships, and the rest of the organization know where to go when it comes to these often incredibly complicated relationships, because it will enable them to keep track of the resources. It will enable them to keep track of the contracts and their service level agreements, and therefore keep track of the information through a properly organized information asset register attached to that document set.
And that's part of the challenge, is that these relationships are procured through a procurement department. Once the procurement is complete, then they're passed to contract management, but contract management from a financial management perspective, not from a relationship management perspective.
So you're ending up with the same question, isn't it, Mike? It's who owns this? Who actually owns this? And in the absence of a centralized control, nobody does.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how do we stay current with the changing regulations and all these attacks getting worse? What is your view on the market, and what we can expect from you guys in the future?
Well, I think if we look at standards, you know, we've had standards like ISO 27001 for a long time now. And within that standard, there is a reasonable focus on third party and supplier assurance and how we manage the risks associated with them. But what we need to be doing is getting better at understanding the risk to start with. And often what we'll see is a risk register that simply has, there's a risk from third parties. Well, what risk? Where is the threat coming from? Where are we vulnerable to that threat? Because if we don't get more granular in understanding threat and vulnerability, then what we're trying to do is manage this grey risk that hasn't been properly articulated. Again, if we look at regulation, look at things like the NIS directive. At the heart of the NIS directive, again, is understanding third-party risk, understanding supplier assurance, and managing that risk effectively. So the real answer to this is not go out and buy more technology because you've got a third-party threat. It's actually sit down and spend time understanding the threat to start with, and understanding threat and understanding why you're vulnerable to that threat will almost intuitively and naturally lead you to the solutions you need to put in place. But you can't fix this with one sticking plaster. It's a whole combination of factors: supplier assurance, audits, contract management and client management, education, looking at your infrastructure and infrastructure connectivity, and where you've got high risk connectivity, can it be appropriately monitored or segregated? We need to do all of these things in one. So this is not an IT problem. It is a business problem that needs to be driven by business understanding business risk.
Fantastic. So maybe Ellie, last questions. How the company measure the success of their third-party risk program?
Ooh, that's a leading question. I think sometimes really good security and being really lucky can look a little bit similar. I think if you've got senior management involved, if you've got genuine leadership involved in your third-party risk management program, you're going in the right direction. I think so. Alongside ownership, leadership is absolutely vital. And if leadership is evident and being used, then I would say that's probably a very good sign.
Fantastic. That's why all my questions. If you have something to add to some whatever I forgot to ask you that will benefit our listeners, please go ahead.
I'd probably suggest having a look at ISO 27001 as a standard, because it looks at third-party risk and supply chain risk in a very logical and practical way, and in a way that integrates into the rest of the information security of an organization. It intersects beautifully.
You
And I
also
also
have.
think that,
Go ahead.
sorry,
Go ahead.
Boris. I also think that without a doubt, occasionally having somebody from outside your organization actually look at what you're doing, actually looking at your supplier assurance program, that can bring a huge amount of benefit, because sometimes we can, without realizing it, make intuitive leaps of faith that things are there. And I've seen this before, where the planning process is, if we put these controls in place then, and then we forget to put the controls in place, but we're already thinking that we're now safe because we've done it.
Right. I think you also have mentioned that you have some research paper about this. We might, if you want, we might put it on the show notes descriptions.
Yes, I'll send you a link and you can put it in the description.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, guys. It was very useful, and we will certainly this will be very useful for our members who are not familiar with third-party risk, and with those who familiar, they will refresh their kind of understanding. So thank you very much, and hope Happy New Year, and hope this year will bring us better economically and kind of geopolitically situation that we were involved in the last year.
Yeah, we're certainly
so
longing
too.
for the boring times of the pre-2020s, that's for sure.
Definitely.
All right.
Thank you very
guys.
much, Boris. It was lovely talking to you.
Yeah,
All
thanks,
right.
Boris.
Thank you.